There we go. And now, bam. Welcome back to the Baytarans podcast. I am Joe, and I am joined with Alex and Sam yet again.
Yet again.
Yet again. How dare all of you? You know what? You know what bothers me? Copycats. People who copy powers. How dare they? You know, where do they get off? This is where I was hoping that someone would have something witty to say, but okay.
No, not really. I mean, we're all in agreement they suck. You know, they just, God damn it.
Well, actually, devil's advocate, I actually believe they're pretty damn cool.
You just said they suck?
Yeah.
Well, he's the devil's advocate, you know.
Well,
I can say they suck and they're cool at the same time.
I mean, a lot of things suck and are cool. I mean, hey, a vacuum cleaner sucks and it tidies my house, so, you know, that's pretty cool, man.
Roundabouts.
Swings and roundabouts.
And where is the praise for vacuum cleaners? That's what just be the pod.
Yeah, just you know what, guys? All right, no more copying powers. We're going to talk about vacuum cleaners, hoovers, you know. Anyway, but we're actually talking about copying powers, specifically powers that copy other powers. This is a pretty simple one. Anything that has the ability to imitate another person's powers from a power source, it counts. That's literally the whole deal. Not a power that can imitate it through their own abilities. For instance, the Green Lantern ring grants the person light manipulation, flight, and super strength if they use the powers right. And it's like, that's not copying, that's imitating. We're talking about literally either taking a person's powers in the forms of the exact same way that their powers work, they can now use them, but they're not stealing them because the other person still has them. Obviously, there's loads of examples. I mean, the biggest example that I can think of immediately is Amazo from Justice League, or Monoma from My Hero Academia, or just any big ones. I guess you could say like is the exact thing of copycat. But do you guys have any
Yeah, I have a question. Does Kirby count in that case?
His is more assimilation.
Yeah.
Considering he swallows them up and they practically die. It's kind of the same thing as either fusing, assimilating, or even stealing rather than copying. I mean, in Smash,
Kirby is the Borg.
I mean, yeah. I mean, well, in Smash he still survives. He just has to, you know, his targets still survive.
So,
he just has to but you know.
But we don't necessarily count that as canon to the actual Kirby mythos, because if it is canon to the mythos, it would mean that any of the people that he swallows actually just don't survive the process.
He just poops them out again, just fully formed.
So you know, there's a ton of different things, but let's be honest, it's not canon. So yeah, I'd say assimilation, not copying.
Fair enough.
That was your entire argument, wasn't it? You're like, yes, Kirby.
Well, yes, Kirby. You know what? Yes, Kirby.
Kirby's great, but we're not talking about him.
No, that's the thing. I don't really have many. You know, it's not one of those powers that I really infused me, to be honest. So I don't really have many, you know, examples that I like or could really talk about.
That's
fine.
Kirby,
I mean, and Kirby doesn't even count.
I mean, to be fair, this podcast is more going to be talking about the actual usages of it, and also upsides and downsides. But before we get onto that, Sam.
Yes, I am here.
Do you have any particular copying ideas?
Well, I mean, Parasite, I suppose, does copy, although he does drain at the same time.
Yeah, he doesn't have to stay in contact with them anymore, does he?
No, pretty much he just drains them. They lose power weakens somewhat, but he gets the powers nonetheless.
Okay, and finally, do the people still have their abilities and still can use them whilst he's using theirs?
Yes.
Do they lose the amount of power that he gains?
That's a hotly debated issue.
Because if so, that's more of siphoning or stealing than it is copying.
I think he does. I think they kind of. I think they're more just kind of weakened as opposed to lose their powers altogether.
Yeah, kind of like a life drain on top of copying. Kind of like a secondary effect of his copying is that he needs to siphon some of their life force rather than their actual power. If that's so, then it's just copying with an extra ability on top.
Because his power essentially is just to drain life. The only reason he gains superpowers is just a fringe benefit when he touches people with superpowers.
Then yeah, I count it as copying for now, unless someone else wants to debate otherwise. But yeah.
Until someone says, no, Sam, in Superman Comics number 128.
Well, actually, it's actually the actual comics state that Superman loses his ability because of his solar radiation is being absorbed by Parasite.
I mean, I say that, but I am that guy whenever it comes to Spider-Man.
Minus,
I would be.
minus the glasses and lisp, yeah.
Actually, Venom kind of does that.
Yeah, he kind of copies an aspect. He takes an aspect of their personality, and sometimes the way that they use their powers. I don't think he necessarily copies their powers, but he does imitate and copy their aspects. But I wouldn't say copying, because he doesn't create webs so much as he just shoots out more of his own gunk.
He does grant other people the power of everything but the Sixth Sense.
But that's more just because that he's already enhanced, sticky, and amorphous, so he could do most of Spider-Man's abilities anyway.
It's more like sort of adapting it.
Well, okay, it's more like just not realizing how creative you could be with your original powers. As we said way back in spatial time, telepathy, and even nature and biology, is that every single power has multiple uses, even if you don't know it yet. As we said with biology, it's oh yeah, you could heal people and, bring back their muscle fibers, or you could make them grow back thicker and they now have enhanced strength, or make them a little softer and more relaxed so that they can be more flexible. It really depends, but I would say that that's not copying. That's more him imitating because he didn't have the creativity to know that he could do that with his powers. Venom's always a weird case, I think. That's my opinion anyway. I don't know.
Okay, I can give you one that is much better than from Spider-Man for this exact one, because they're... You know Amazo?
Yes, I do know Amazo.
You're aware of Amazo. They have someone kind of similar to that in the 2099 universe called Flipside.
Oh, right.
Essentially, he was an android that was put in... That was probably just kind of just kind of left alone for a long time. And he was meant to essentially just take over to assume the powers of any hero he came in contact with. But all the powers he knew of were powers of the characters during the 21st century.
Oh.
All the heroes of that day. However, because he came in contact with people of the 2099 timeline, he gains somewhat odd powers because they're not the right powers that he knows how to copy.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, he takes over 2090. He tries to take over 2099 powers. Spider-Man, you copy his powers, but his powers are different to Spider-Man's of the present day. He's got a cool costume. He's a funny wee character.
So we have a few examples there, but let's talk about the examples of the actual power now. In my opinion, or the way that I've seen copying is, it's really the standpoint of the ability is the user doesn't necessarily have another power, but it doesn't mean that they, just because that they have another power with copying, or it has an effect that copies powers, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not copying, because again, as we said, Parasite, he drains the life, and it's just as a sub feature of that ability, he can then gain their abilities temporarily or copy them. But I would say the whole point of copying is you're not gaining a power more powerful than theirs. You're not gaining their power and taking their power away. Your power is literally, you are literally mirroring the exact way that their powers work. That's my sort of opinion of it. I don't know if you guys agree or if you have anything to add to it.
I think I do agree with it. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm not too keen on it, because there's this whole jack of all trade, master of none element to it. Like, you can copy any power that you like, you know, either with tactile contact or just by witnessing it, whatever. But that doesn't necessarily make you like an expert in it. Like, you just have the power now, and it's for a limited time or an indefinite amount of time. You have to kind of, you know, you're not necessarily going to use those powers in the same way or really even understand them, which has a lot of narrative possibilities. But it's like, well, you know, you can have all of this infinite power seemingly, but you're not going to be useful in a fight if you don't know how to use it, or if you're just at the base level of that power.
Yeah.
So I'm just sort of like, I mean, I know that's like you're probably just like holding your tongue, saying like, oh, but Alex, you play like a jack of all trade, master of none, and yes, that is true. It's because I'm disorganized and messy, not because of any good reason. And also, it's strange and ironic that I don't really particularly like those powers.
It's funny
even though
because
you
you've
would
never
expect it.
played a character with copying, so that's not actually my defense. So that's more of maybe a personal thing that you kind of self personalized to yourself and realize, oh no. But I didn't see the connection between the power
No,
and the
because remember when
characters.
we were creating characters for each other, you were absolutely convinced that I didn't randomly roll those things for Bill's character, which was hyper agility and
Copying. Oh
copying.
yes.
Yeah, and you were like, oh yeah, that's an Alex character. You know, partly because, you know, I've chosen hyper agility before, it was fun, but also when it's like,
It
oh yeah, like you can have all of the powers there, so you know, you can literally have it all. I'm like, no, literally, that wasn't my choice. I just randomly rolled it, and
it was
that was
funny because when what ticked me off was the combination, but also the way that the powers were built.
well.
The way that you leveled them. As your friend and your over like almost 2 years now, long time DM. Man, it has been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I've been your DM for a long time, and I've seen those exact matches, with those personality traits with every single one of you, where I told every single one of you, you know, make characters, give them to everyone else, give them to each other, and then I'll try and figure out whose characters were whose. And I guessed every single one of them exactly right. And the only one that I felt like I wasn't, well, there was two characters that I felt like I wasn't just randomly guessing, and that was the character that you gave to my brother, and it was, I think it was the character that Sam had, only because that Alfie had made a comment during the game, and I thought, it's weird that you said that, almost like as if you knew how that character was. He played it off well, but I was like, I'm still gonna take this inkling. And then,
We're not good at Among Us either. We're not good at bluffing you.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Hey, maybe at some point we'll have to do a live stream of Among Us and see how bad we are at lying at each other.
See how that works. I
But I
could
don't
never
know.
lie to you.
What do you think on your opinions of copying, Sam? Do you think that we covered anything? Do you disagree with anything that was said so far about it? Or?
Can be used for a great deal of horror, I guess. It depends on depending on what powers you copy and the person whose powers you copy. It could be And depending, like, it depends on which way you copy the powers as well. If it's just straight out, you touch them and you gain all of their powers. If it's like the parasite, you drain them and you get their memories. Either way, it's kind of can be used to pretty much scare your opponent if you just steal their powers. Use them just in the same way as them.
I mean, it is embarrassing as well if the copycat like takes your powers and uses them better than you. That is like the ultimate flex.
Yeah.
Well. Like, yeah, I've got your powers. Like, yeah, they look better on me. You know, which
I mean, you're not wrong. That is very embarrassing, but one would argue that the more embarrassing thing would be if someone uses a power or copies your powers and they go, oh, this power is useless, and then removes it to try and find something else, or would prefer fighting without any powers until they could copy a better one.
it's embarrassing. I just shoot you. Like, you know, I'm just gonna use a gun and just cut out the middleman.
You know what, I'll just use this tiny little needle. I'll use this instead. It's much more safer for me to fight you with a random safety pin than it is for me to fight you with this power. Although I'll tell you what, I would be very silly if I didn't actually bring this up. I grew up in the sort of time when I don't know if you've ever heard of this, the animated series X-Men Evolution.
Oh yeah, heck yeah.
Where they altered how Rogue's powers were, and I didn't know that this is how her powers originally were in the comics, which is originally she obviously, the longer she holds someone, the closer they are to death, and she can use other people's powers while she has a hold of them. The only person who has been able to survive a long enough time has been Jean Grey whilst she had, I think, the Phoenix Force, and ever since then Rogue had the permanent ability of, like, at least some level of, like, enhanced tactile telekinesis, meaning that she had super strength while she was touching things, and also that she had flight. Supposedly, she can do other things. I mean, there are probably many other things that she can do, but in the X-Men Evolution comic, she actually, the more people she touches, she then gains every single one of their memories, and they then feel, the person that she touches feel an intense amount of pain, but she then gains all of their memories, and if they're a mutant, she then gains their powers, so she can use their powers. But there's an issue where if she does, she can sometimes accidentally take on some of the personality traits of that person while she's using those abilities. But it then says that it's actually not limited to other mutants, it's because that she can touch any person and gain their memories. She can technically do that with even beings that don't have mutated powers, like, for instance, Juggernaut. And at one point she has this where she touches tons of different mutants and tons of different people, and she then touches Mystique, and then she then gains shapeshifting. But because of her shapeshifting ability, she then turns into every single person, and she then has a mental breakdown where she literally just is anyone and everyone at any moment. Yeah. So I'd say, like, it depends on the permanence of a copying ability, but they can also have drastic effects like that. I mean, I don't know, like, that's kind of interesting.
I mean, there is a reason why in lots of media, Rogue does want to get rid of her powers.
Yeah, well, she'd kill anyone who touches them.
Because it's like, that is like one of the downsides. Like, yes, she can have any power, but not only do the powers not necessarily work the way that they do on the original host, but you can also kill someone just by kissing them. That's heartbreaking. That's like, yeah, you wouldn't want to use your copying ability. Like, also, you have to get close enough to do that. Like, it's all very well saying, yeah, I can copy the abilities of a celestial being, but can you get near enough to touch one?
I mean, that's also another thing of, like, that seems like Rogue's power, especially in Now's situation, seems like the perfect ability for an introvert asexual. Because it's just that thing of, like, and aromantic. Just someone who just doesn't really want any contact, and if they're introvert, they just don't want to be outside at all. That's the perfect power, but that's not the point of the power, is it? She's a person who actually does have some level of extrovert wants and desires, and she does actually fall in love a couple of times with a couple of different characters, and she has to struggle through that, and that's what makes her interesting. That her copying ability doesn't weaken another person's powers. I want to point this out. Like, this is another interesting ability. Copying that only works whilst either holding onto them or it's draining their life that she can't control. Now, so that to me, that's an interesting form of copying anyway.
Even
But
if you were like asexual, aromantic as well, it's like, you know, humans crave touch as well, and they crave.
that's
like,
why I added introvert. I wanted to point out
Yeah,
some
even
introverts
if you're
don't want
introverted,
contact.
though, if you accidentally bump into someone, it's just, you know, it's a real problem. So even if you are in like the so-called perfect person, it still would cause a lot of complication. I mean, you could
Yeah.
instantly out yourself as a mutant just by falling over and bumping into someone and almost killing them. You know,
Another issue with that power is that I think, well, actually, she does say though, as long as she's wearing always something on her or clothing, she's absolutely fine. But there's a joke that someone makes where they say, "So let me get this straight. Your powers are basically you're a life leech. You suck the life out of people. You will kill them with just a single touch." If I were you, I'd be wearing oven gloves and an entire hazmat suit. Or just, I don't know, really thick jumpers and sweaters. Yet when you go out on day-to-day life, it's skimpy outfits and very thin clothing. Like, you've even got gloves that can be easily torn off. It's like, you know, you it's that thing of like...
Thank you, comic books.
Yeah, thank you, comic books. But it is so true though, because I mean, let's be honest, especially with the current parallels of now, even if someone is told, you know, this will kill someone, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a factor of comfortability or wanting attention or wanting to just feel normal, even just for normal, you know, like, you know, even the fact that like they do always forget that like in the certain times that she's in the comics at the very beginning and even in X-Men Evolution, she's between like, I think 16, 18, maybe even like not even 20 yet. So she's sort of like still adolescent teenager. She still is like, well, maybe I can get away with it. Maybe I do have a handle on it as long as no one touches me or as long as I don't fall over. But it is that naivete and arrogance that inevitably does get her.
human. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
part of her flaws are that what makes her a good character. I would say that Rogue, you know, is a good example of a character, you know, shaped by their powers. Really, like, you have all of this anxiety and like they do have that in the back of the mind, but they still wanna be, you know, human and do things and like, you know, that normal teenagers do, and it's like that's just, you know, you'd go crazy if you didn't, or at least, you know, have a little fun and away from that and push that to your back of the mind sometimes. You know, so
I don't know.
good
What do you
example.
think, Sam? We've let you. Well, I've spoken a lot, but we haven't let you speak up.
Oh,
I've just been considering in my mind how Parasite is essentially just Rogue, but pure evil.
But better.
No, because yeah, actually, I was just debating in my mind who would actually win the copying power, like the soul stealing power of Rogue versus Parasite.
Only reason that I think that it would be Rogue. Only reason is because that she has the ability to kill people fairly quickly if she holds onto them. She can even kill people like Wolverine. Whereas Parasite has done this against, fair enough, Kryptonians, but also has done this against characters like the Flash and other different abilities and so on and so forth, metahumans that are similar to the cosmic ones, like the cosmic superhumans, like what do you call it, Fantastic Four, and also have been used, you know, similar to that of the mutants. So I mean, I don't know. I still say Rogue.
I mean, he is made sure to drain the life out of people quite quickly.
Yeah.
I mean,
but how
out
many
of normal
times
people, I should say.
build up in preparation for that fight? That's my question. Because if this is Rogue with telekinetic flight and super speed, and the parasite is just like level 0. It just hasn't stockpiled that up yet. It's just got like super strength or something. Then he's done.
And Parasite doesn't actually even have super strength. He's just he is normal man until he touches someone.
And this rogue.
Isn't he an amorphous mass though?
Depends on which comic. At some points he is just like normal man but purple. Other times he is this hulking globulous creature that is just continually hungry.
I wouldn't want to hold on to that. I wouldn't want to hold on to that if I was Rogue. If he's just a great big horrible hulking blob.
Either way though, like so, copying powers in general. Okay? So let's just say for the sake of it, what would you say is the worst possible place or possible downside for a copying ability? Like either you have to choose either a location or a downside for a copying ability.
I mean, there's a very easy downside, which is like the downside of have you ever heard of Prometheus, the bad guy of Batman?
No.
Essentially, he has like the same backstory as Batman, except reverse. Where like cops killed his criminal family.
Oh
yeah. And pretty much instead of actually learning like combat moves, he uses like computer discs in a helmet to pretty much help him learn martial arts. It was in the 90s. It made sense.
Yeah, no, go on.
And Batman decided the best way to defeat him was to give him the martial prowess of. I remember now. It was quite Stephen Hawking's.
No.
Oh!
So that's who it was. So essentially, Prometheus just crumbled up at that point.
Oh my god!
And was defeated because he gave him. Imagine that, but with powers.
Okay,
must
so
be some power you would copy that you'd immediately be screwed. You'd immediately be just like, oh.
So you're saying a power that you're saying a power that the user, if they copied, would actually hurt them, or even as you said before, like no control over it or something.
Or like say again, let's go for the basic example of like Superman. Actually, no, I know, like this like the alternate universe Superman who gains his power from kryptonite, loses it, but like pretty much dies in sunlight. Imagine if like Rogue or Parasite touched one of those and the sun came around.
It's like, wrong Superman!
I mean,
just like crumble to dust.
There is another one that I was going to say, which would actually be funny as a downside. Copying the powers, but not the physiological changes that comes with it. So, say for instance, pyrokinesis or the Human Torch is like, okay, I can generate heat, and then just instantly just combusts themselves and just dies from burning themselves alive.
Or it could be like, even simple things like super strength. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna punch this wall, and you just end up completely shattering your arm because you've tried to punch through a wall, but you don't have the durability of a super strength word, so you it with the.
I mean, hey, that sounds like a really cool theme for someone to have. Definitely isn't a show part of a thing that happens in a show that I really like, where a guy isn't used to his powers yet and he breaks his bones quite a lot.
I mean, there is a funny part in the Superman cartoon where Parasite does do that. where he's halfway through losing his powers, he can still like use like the the X-ray vision.
Oh yeah.
He just kind of begins to flicker in and out, and he attempts to break a wall. He just punches it, goes
It all goes back to copying it is not the same thing as like actually having those powers, because it's like those aren't your powers and you're not used to using them, and you've backfired. It's backfired horribly because you've got it in spirit, you've got what you wanted, but you don't know how to use it, and using it is just toxic to you. So that's like my big gripe with the power.
I'd say the worst possible location, since we've said like situations or downsides, I'd say copying the worst location is in a world where either superpowers don't exist or a world where superpowers don't exist yet. Because now you can copy either no one's powers, or the only thing that you can copy is people's physical skills. And although that might be useful, again, as we've stated, like, your physiology might not be able to handle it. Because let's be honest, say for instance, like, oh, I have the ability to run as far or as fast as an Olympic runner, but your body isn't used to it. So it's like, yeah, you have the skills and you have the training, but then you're still going to get tired. Or, yes, you now have the ability to just, like, completely annihilate something at, like, throwing a javelin the furthest, but then your arms are just completely shattered because the muscle fibers aren't specifically taut or flexible enough to be able to withstand that, because you haven't gone through the physical training that is required to do so. So in other words, it's either a power that's useless because it does nothing, or a power that actually is more mundane.
Actually, there actually was a character like that in the TV show Heroes. If any of you have seen that.
Oh, everyone keeps telling me to see that.
Pretty much.
I would say, yeah, you know, so it's so. Like, it has some good ideas, but it falls down the bullshit tree and hits every
Essentially,
ground.
from what I can remember, the character could only copy things that she's seen, not actual superpowers. So she could do things like WWE moves on people because she watched wrestling, or like could also be like a great cook. Various other like skills and benefits that she just kind of saw people do. You know, like the knife trick.
You know, she could also be like, she's a trick actually. She could be an amazing plagiarist. Like, she could just, if she sees a work of art or someone paint a work of art, she could just like replicate it or like sign someone's signature perfectly. So
Yeah.
but again, that's not as cool as like being able to suplex someone. So
I don't know.
Yeah, but it's far more lucrative.
I mean, if you wanted to be a villain, you could literally just call yourself the plagiarist.
I wouldn't mind. Yeah, actually, I wouldn't mind. That would be the most. Yeah, you know what? They'd be unstoppable, really, because
Just
if they could copy something exactly, they could do the whole. They could do the whole. Don't shoot. No, they're the imposter, and you could just take over someone's life. If they're like,
I am fraudulent man.
I still like the plagiarist only just because that fraudulent man seems a little flashy, because especially if you shout out, I am fraudulent man. If they go, oh no, it's the plagiarist, it seems like more of a secretive name. Similar to cover. It's like, that's not on the nose enough. Cover was undercover the whole time. So, okay, so we're talking about like the downsides or the bad parts of the copying power. I'm gonna say something. Limiting factors to copying. I feel like, as we've talked previously, permanence. I don't know if you guys find this. I find it more interesting when copying doesn't have permanent copying. I find it more interesting when it has a limit, a time limit. Not necessarily stating that, like, we're talking about the limitations of, like, they can copy but then they take damage from using the powers. Like, say for instance, when they copy the powers, it's like their physiology is perfectly corrected to that ability, but they then have a short period of time where they can use that one power or a multitude of powers. Then after that, they need to either wait a short period of time before they can copy it again, or they need to reintroduce themselves to that person in the way that their power requires it. So say for instance, they have to touch someone, or they have to get their blood, or they have to just see them doing a specific ability based on their powers. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on this. I don't know. I prefer the idea where there's more limitations to copying rather than just I can copy all powers forever and there's no limit to the amount of powers I can have.
I mean, yeah, it is a double-edged sword, because if you have too many limitations, it's like you get the row problem of like, well,
What's the
I
point?
don't want to use these powers anymore, but if, yeah, basically being able to copy any powers for, with no downsides at all. It's like, well, everyone would do that. Like, they'd just be unbeatable because they would have taken all of the power from everywhere and, like, say, right, I have no weaknesses and I have no, all strength, all might, if you will.
No, I won't. Continue.
So it's just going to be impossible to do that. It's just no fun. It's no fun. Like, as much as I don't like the limitations of copying and like the play of it, like, it would be so much less fun if there were no downsides. Like, there's just so much you can do, like getting over those limitations, or just applying your powers, in just the right way to save the day.
Yeah.
You gotta be clever with it.
What about you, Sam?
I would say it makes sense that they have less permanence, because we see what happens with characters that do have permanence with copying powers, like Amazo, who they always, in some aspect, have to make go away.
Or have
Or for the sake of
weaknesses based on those powers.
For the sake of the story, just kind of beat through, technical mumbo jumbo, essentially. Whereas people, because they're the only two people I can think of, Parasite and Rogue. For story reasons, it works that they don't have permanent powers, because then they're more beatable, or easily beatable, I should say. In the fact that anyone could beat them, depending, like, pretty much they just have to wait out the time limit for their powers. Kind of stop working.
I'd say probably the best example for this is a time limit having to wait is probably the best thing to have that. But as the best example for it is when a set of, say for instance, in D&D, when you have something that lasts a certain amount of time, it is that thing of, do we just run away, do we just defend ourselves, or even in shows they sometimes have it where it's like, we just need to wait until they run out, and either as a comedy effect where it's like, uh-oh, my powers are gone, I'm not as cool as I once was, or even having it that it's that thing of like, there's that limiting time limit, and it's that thing of once it's finally over, there's now a certain level of balance in the show again, because with permanence it is just, okay, how do we get rid of them, because at this point they're just the MacGuffin that can win no matter what, sort of thing.
Actually, because I keep mentioning it up, the Superman cartoon did actually do that. They did. The first episode Parasite showed up in, he realized his powers weren't permanent and actually kidnapped Superman and essentially just kind of put him in like in this water, kind of like this water piped area chained up, and every so often when his powers would fade, he would just snack on him. No, like he would know, like essentially he would just touch him. Drain the powers every time his powers would kind of drain. So he knew he had a time limit, and Superman therefore had time to kind of realize what, like, he knew how long he had before he showed up.
Yeah,
essentially. Jimmy Olsen saved the day, and Superman got freed. And I think Parasite just touched kryptonite, which made him lose his powers and memories for reasons.
Yeah, because that makes sense. The powers, maybe, but
rock. So I'll give it that. The kryptonite in general is a MacGuffin rock, so you might as well just depower him.
I'm sure that there's probably one color of kryptonite that also affects time as well. So at this point, it is just the God Rock. We're at some point going to find out that like it's there's also one that's made out of nth metal or something. And even then, finally having it, they're like, oh yeah, basically like if you have all of the colors combined, then you can basically make a new universe or something. I was actually going to say though, with the way that we do it in Anime Tales with the Power Compendium, we have 3 different abilities that have a copying effect. And I'm gonna ask the two of you about your opinions on each one, but I'm gonna say you get to choose which of those three that you can share your opinions on, in the terms of if you could use them in real life, or if you had to use them in the game, in a campaign or something. So
Are
there
you
are...
referring to that ability that they have in Adaptive Mind, where you can, was like we're talking about with skill copying, basically?
No.
Yeah, because I thought that would be, that's something that I would kind of have, just like, I wouldn't be able to copy powers per se, but I'd be able to essentially absorb any kind of information just by seeing it once.
It's more
to
like
copy.
learning it, really, because you're not necessarily
Mm.
copying it. Because again, copying is more, as I said, taking an aspect or actually using one's other powers without necessarily stealing.
Where's that thing in Adaptive Mind where you can, someone, basically change your vices and virtues by copying personality?
You can copy their personality, yes. However, it's more similar to imitation. Because again, you have the ability to be wrathful or prideful on your own rights. It's just that your personality is not necessarily like, say for instance, you could say for instance be around people that are very bigoted or very open-minded or very zealous, and you might not be, but then using this power you can just be like, okay, I'm now going to use this power, get into their mind space, alright, here we go, and then you just go, well, howdy folks, and then immediately just stand up in front of everyone and literally are able to talk to all three of these separate crowds exactly the way that you need to, because you can imitate their vices, virtues, and their personality wavelengths. But that's not necessarily copying, it's more imitating, because again, you have the ability of knowing the right words and saying the right things, and even potentially doing those actions. It's just that you as a person do not believe that you could do that because of mental blocks, or even just because, morality or your own moral compass. Whether because that it's the right thing or wrong thing, it doesn't matter. It's more what your ability or your mind is able to achieve. I will give you a hint. It is not under Adaptive Mind, because you will be here all day trying to figure out Adaptive Mind.
I'm just trying to figure out what the third one is, because I know the first two.
I mean, I can say the third one if you guys want to talk about the other two.
All right. I mean, I just like straightforward copying.
Fuck.
That's kind of like, you like that one because your character had it.
He actually,
so-
he actually got to play as it.
Yeah,
God,
I mean, I'm biased because I really like Cover.
Yeah, Cover. Even though Cover had the power of copying, he barely used it.
I
I should rephrase. Okay. The character of Cover had the ability to copy other people's powers through touch, but because he had leveled up his power, he had the power of favoritism. Essentially meant he could keep a power to himself, much like Rogue with the Jean Grey powers. But Cover decided to keep a power called biokinesis.
Yep.
Which is to kind of manipulate the life force of beings around him, either to heal or to do damage or to kind of the other things. And he mostly used it to heal people along the way, and because he was a charismatic dude, he coerced people to kind of join his side through means that is a completely different story here.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because it's like I did not know that you had copying until much later into the game, because it's just I thought that you were just a biokinetic user.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because didn't you? Yeah, because you copied both of Alex's powers when they were playing as Aspen, who had biokinesis and nature, and you said, "Yeah, I'm gonna copy and favorite biokinesis." And you sent me that message so that then you didn't tell anyone what your powers were. And I was like, okay.
Must because
undercover agent.
Also, mostly because at some point I was debating should I try and I was going to say steal there, acquire someone else's powers in the group, who I believed had cooler powers. But that didn't pan out, so I kept the power of biokinesis.
Whose was that? Whose powers was that?
Not a clue. I just remember there being someone else's powers. I thought, I won't tell them because I might need their powers.
I can't even remember anymore. I mean, there were so many different abilities that were great.
The copying also worked because one of the bad guys my character fought was a character called Threadcount.
Oh,
Had
yes.
the power to control fabrics and various different kind of weaves, essentially. And my character wears, because he's like we'll say semi-normal, wears clothing, and had his main weapon is a cape. So he'd be pretty much screwed against this character who could just constrict him Magneto style with his weaves. And I think the reason I won the battle was I did use a mixture of taking the powers to counteract her powers, trying to pretty much when she was trying to attack me, I used her powers to stop the attack on me.
It was like
And
it's like if two telekinetics grab the same box and are like, no, and it was that sort of Jedi thing of you could have won, you could have used the Force to help us, and that's exactly what you did.
It's kind of pretty much like two Force hitting each other and stopping each other.
Yeah.
Frankly enough, all I needed to do was to stop her because I actually had other attacks I could do.
I mean, that is kind of because it was the reason why it worked so well for characters, because there was that element of surprise. You were constantly surprising people, not just with like solving problems via charisma and peaceful means, rather than just beating it out of them.
Being a punch drunk fight monkey like an Arco or something.
Yeah, just you did it to because you didn't tell anybody about your copying powers. It's like suddenly we're just everyone was kind of confused as to what your true powers actually were. I mean, if you people would eventually figure it out, but like in the middle of a fight, if they don't know, it's like, oh, this guy's got pyrokinesis. I have the ability to manipulate fabric. He's got a cape. This will be over quickly. And then suddenly it's like the ultimate no you card because I have that power now, and it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
I think that attests to the copying's use.
These days, you're going to have to actually tell the story of Cover. The great Cover, considering we keep mentioning him and bringing him up in context
if people
of
are
these
interested
stories.
enough, we'll be doing the campfire story soon, so you'll get to
Connor,
say your piece.
Connor, come up to me next time and tell me if you want to hear about Cover.
Because
we've so much, man. I get just flashbacks to the moment.
So that's copying. So you got to use favoritism. Now there are two different variants of copying. Once you get to max level, which is favoritism as to what you got, and ability learning, which basically any techniques or abilities that another person has, when you see them being used even just once, you can then roll to see if you can copy them. If you do, you can keep them permanently, and as long as they're abilities that are emitter style, so in other words things that are generated or outside of the body, the powers can actually alter it. However, if the powers or techniques that you saw require something like a special ability or physiological change, then the user cannot activate those abilities until they then have copied a power that grants them something similar. So, for instance, let's say like a super maxed out punch that is so powerful that it shocks so much pressure of air that it actually creates like a thunderous air blast. It's like, okay, well that requires super strength or aerokinesis. So theoretically, because the person that they saw who had super strength, they can copy that ability, but now they have to wait until they get super strength. But if they saw someone having electricity and they could use super speed because they supercharged themselves, then they can ability learn this, and then basically at any point in time they can just go, all right, I cover myself in electricity and I have the ability to use it temporarily without any damage to myself, because the person I copied it off of doesn't take damage from the electricity. Wouldn't mean that the user was immune, it just means that they'd be immune to the lightning whilst using this ability. Once it ends, obviously that's it. So those are the two different abilities. I mean, I quite liked Cover's permanence to that ability because again, it had balance because there's only one ability that could ever be permanent. One power that could ever be permanent. I
mean, I think I had to roll. I had to roll like a 20 or more with my power to actually choose which one was permanent.
Yes, yeah.
But there is a level of concentration to it. Well, I mean, narratively, I mean, it is kind of in the game, but it is sort of a level of skill that you need to have in order to do that in the first place.
Yeah, it's also a level of remembrance.
You did actually have to be able to physically touch someone. I think it was specifically had to touch them with your hands, I think.
Yes, you have to either touch them with your hands or anything that is infused with your own DNA or blood.
Again, that is the genius of your character, Sam, because everybody wants to give Cover a hug. So you'd never be out of opportunities.
It's just constant handshakes all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's actually how you copied you. I think you said, "Nice to meet you," and you shook Aspen's hand.
Well, the first time we met, all I did was I shook everyone's hand, and I decided what to take based on that. What powers do you have? 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 Well, they all suck. I'm choosing Aspen's. Choosing balcony.
I'm special. I'm favorite.
So, Alex, what about you? The other power is amalgamation.
I quite like that, but it's like, I don't know. Instead of copying all the powers, you can copy like specific aspects, I guess. So it's like, yeah, you can have a bit of customizability with that, I suppose.
So, for those who don't know, amalgamation is usually the concept of multiple things being mushed into one, multiple things being of one, an amalgam of multiple things, either creatures or powers or anything. Technically, you could say that I don't know, a laptop or a computer is an amalgam of bits of circuitry and electronics that eventually create the device that it is. A computer or a laptop. That was a really bad explanation, but I'm going to keep going with this. But
installing yourself, I'll install some better arms.
In the game, the way that it works is basically as an amalgam. Unlike copying, you don't need to touch people. However, like copying, you gain people's abilities and powers. And the way that it literally works is from level 0 all the way to level 9. You basically every single person around you within a 30 or more radius, when you're in combat or when you activate your powers, you have a short period of time where you basically, the closest people to you, you have all of their abilities. It's based on person rather than powers. So if a person has multiple abilities, that just counts as, okay, that's that person they are this power source. So power source 1 has this many abilities. Power source 2 has this many abilities. Power source 3, etc., etc. There are limitations and there are levels that can alter it. For instance, outside of combat, you can't use it until you get to the 3rd level. And then when you do, you have a time limit. But when you're in combat, there's no time limit. The downside to this, unlike copying, however, is for every amount of people and power sources that you have that have abilities, any of their weaknesses add on to yours. If you have a direct weakness that multiplies damage, it then removes any damage immunities you have. For instance, if you have an ability where it grants you an immunity to electricity, but then because you're part insect, you then have let's say for instance a damage weakness to lightning that's ×2. That immediately neutralizes your immunity because it's giving you all of these things. Because if you're someone who has like the ability of generation of lightning, turning into a human hybrid bug, having super strength, exoskeleton armor, the ability of flight, poison, all of this other lot, it's like even just those are just 2 powers that can grant you all of these different abilities. Imagine if you were in front of 4 people or 3 people who all had either 1 or 2 abilities each. That's either, that's anywhere between 3 all the way up to 6 powers. having all of those has to have a weakness. So that, as well as animite damage, you take the amount of animite damage of yours plus everyone else's animite damage on top.
You can end the fight instantly just by shooting them with an animite bullet, because they're like, it doesn't matter if you have like these godlike powers. If they can't dodge this one tiny chunk of animite, they have like, let's see, depending on how much, you can have like up to 10 times the damage on top of whatever you have. So it's like fight over. So that's like kind of a huge downside. But you gotta hit them though. So
But it is possible to have that many times animite damage, which means it is possible to have up to 9 or 10 powers all at once. I mean, fair enough, they all have to be within the radius of you, but having 9 or 10 powers is insane. Fair enough, there are a couple of problems. For instance, as I said, all of the weaknesses are there, you can't turn them off, and it's based on who's closest to you. So if there are 10 people, all with really sucky powers, within 10 meters of you, and there's one guy who with really powerful godlike powers, and he's 20 meters away from you, you have to have all of these 9 other people's powers who are closest to you, so they all have to fan out before you could then amalgamate this other dude's powers.
basically, the crazy thing about this power is that ranged people, ranged fighters, they can easily overpower these people, because you just have to be far enough away, and you can essentially do like just holding their heads while you kick them from below. Just playing a huge game of keep away, and they won't have any effect on you.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas, like, if you charge at them with super strength, then you kind of shit out of luck, because that's their powers activate, and they can easily counter you. But like again, the one projectile enhancement.
Up until you
off.
get one of the other perks, because you can get 2 different abilities at the end, which is you can get I Am All, and you can get Gluttonous Form. Gluttonous Form allows you to use every single one of your abilities all at once in one whole attack. So you can either use 2 separate types of abilities all at once. So for instance, you can like use fire, and then basically in the game's mechanics, it gives you 2 separate attacks from 2 different individual powers that are completely different from each other. Or you can stack every ability that has the same kind of abilities or damage. For instance, if you get multiple people's powers who have super strength, you can just stack all of their damage on top of each other for like one big blowout attack. Or if everyone has like a form of fire manipulation or generation, you can then just create this massive jet of fire that does everyone's damage on top of each other. The problem with this is it's a higher requirement, and once you use it, if you're outside of combat and you're using the time limit, it ends your time limit immediately. And the other problem is, it's a high requirement. It's not something that you're easily able to always lean on. But Gluttonous Form still gives you a couple of things where temporarily, whilst you're in it, it means that all of your weaknesses are overturned by all of your resistances and immunities. So your biggest weakness becomes your then greatest defense. The only thing is you can never make a resistance to animite damage. So because of that never changes, but at least, say for instance, if you had 3 people who had elemental immunity powers and a bunch of other powers that were super weak against those elements, you now no longer have those weaknesses, and you have a better chance of being able to pull out a victory using that power.
I was just thinking as well, like that character you created with an animite beam.
Yes, yeah.
Stuff. It's like, that would, could potentially one-shot this character, but at the same time, if they could copy that power as well, they could just, fire that as well. Like, yes, they would probably, as long as they couldn't take the damage of the animite, like it didn't get reverberated onto them, then that could still be a counter. So it's, it is kind of a big weakness, and I'm glad that doesn't change, but at the same time, it's not undoable.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And the final thing that is actually funny enough that you bring that, because we can now transition from that. Animite Beam is an ability that is only accessible to husks as Animite Beam emission, where they can basically use the radiation in their own DNA as a superpower where they can shoot it out. As they shoot this beam of pure animite energy, It's the only one under it. But copying and amalgam cannot copy husk abilities until you get the ability I Am All. So if instead of getting Gluttonous Form you go for I Am All allows you to have any biological life form's abilities, any of their stats, so long as they're to do with strength, dexterity, or con, and even willpower. You can get any of their powers, regardless if they are Omegan, Huskonian, or Superhuman, even if they're an anomaly, but that's just a fancy Superhuman. That basically means that you get an access to all of the types of abilities and powers that didn't previously exist before. Plus, because of this, you can pick it, as you said, pick and mix which one. So, okay, I'm going to have this guy's willpower, this guy's super strength, this guy's super dex. I'm going to have this ability here. Oh, and I'm going to have this, that, and the other. And because of that, you can have all of these abilities. But even better, you can now gain access to abilities that you perhaps couldn't have before. For instance, if there are any people in your team that were Huskonian, either Archlings or Shadows, as we saw yesterday, we had the Tiefling Tak Hosu, who has 3 different abilities, being able to create tentacles that project out of his back, the ability to make himself soft and fit through tight spaces, and the ability of camouflage. These abilities would completely be locked off to people who had the powers copying or amalgam until you got I Am All under amalgam. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to this, Sam? As someone who used copying, you know those limitations all too well, but
alright. I was fortunate enough. Covered only was there for about 3 weeks. I want to say.
I think a little bit more than that. But yeah, he was only there.
Yeah, I was never really able to actually see what limitations there were, much because.
I mean, you weren't able to copy Legion or Anarche's powers.
But beyond that, that was the one. That was the one. But their powers, admittedly, would be cool. The ability to control time, the ability of Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix was pretty good, to be fair.
Which was Anarche again?
Oh, and to be honest, as powerful as he was, his powers were super generic. He basically was a Super Saiyan. He basically had energy manipulation and super strength.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. If you had I Am All, and you copied Anarche's dimension traversing ability, you wouldn't be able to get back. If you use that, so it would be
No.
you would totally screw yourself.
Unless you use the level 9 ability, which again is optional, Body Count, where you can touch. Within 1 minute, you can use your abilities tactile. You touch multiple people within a short period of time, and then once that minute is over, any of those people that you touched using this ability, you now permanently have these abilities until you turn it off. So there's no time limit whatsoever.
You'd have to activate that. That's the
You
thing.
have to activate that, and it's a high requirement. Plus,
if
you have to touch people
do that,
within that
then you have absolutely. We've annoyed Helios first of all by doing that, and now it's I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to break the space-time continuum.
Oopsie daisy.
However, I will say this though, because this is adding to this. The final one is structure.
Oh.
And the reason that I say structure is because there's an ability. So there's an ability where structure works is you can break down and reconstruct matter into any shape. However, it cannot be anything further than what its original matter was. So for instance, you can turn stone into steel or diamond or glass. Stone and rock would have to be stone and rock. Metal, like for instance, steel would have to be steel. Iron would have to be iron. Whatever. Any solids you can break down and turn it back into into a different shape or its original shape if it was broken a little. So it's a fixing power or a rebuilding power. You can even get biostructure, which can allow you to do the same, either to deconstruct people to hurt them, or deconstruct then reconstruct them to temporarily give a little bit more pain, but it then undoes one of the previous attacks that was done to them. So it completely can undo one attack's worth of damage, which could very well reattach an arm, or seal up a wound, or undo someone's like head injury or something. But there is an ability called Structure Assimilation, where you can break down something and then re-assimilate it to your body, either giving you like temporary like extra bonus points of health, where you can like have super strength and super defense thanks to like having rock arms, or like basically like steel head or whatever. But you can also do it with biostructure, and one of the abilities is that you can actually assimilate yourself with people, and depending on how much of that blood that you have, you can activate some of their abilities. Now, you can at some point assimilate an entire person into you, so that then you can use all of their abilities.
Didn't we?
Which is exactly what you guys did with your empath telepath character and Alfie's character, who had structure, because he's a big fan of Overhaul. And this is sort of where like this is sort of where the discussion is sort of coming to an end here. But structure kind of uses this as a form of semi-theft copying. They have to take something to copy, but it doesn't steal any of the person's powers, it just steals a chunk of flesh. So it's more like Parasite than anything else. But it creates more of a weakness, because that part of their body or that amount of health that they have is the source of their power. Once it's gone, they don't have the ability to control that power anymore. So, before I sort of close this off, stating, that these three abilities that we've just spoken about, they are they're powers that were actually in the game so far. Do you guys have any particular last closing statements on copying powers as a whole?
I might play an Amalgam character based on this kind of thing now. So I'm a little bit, like I said before, it's not really something that excited me or like wowed me in any way, and I've already seen copying done pretty well with Sam anyway, so I didn't have a need to. But it's like, yeah, next time maybe I'll have a go at Amalgam, because it seems kind of interesting. A bit more of the applications.
Okay. Yeah. What about you, Sam?
I would love to bring Cover back at some point.
Oh, this again. Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh, we're getting the fields for Cover again. Oh, I know.
Here we go again.
Sam, I know.
Yeah.
I'll put my hand on your shoulder. I know, Sam. I know you do, but he's gone. He's gone.
I mean, in my head canon, the real universe where he survived, did all the things he meant to do, as opposed to dying.
But that's
all
not.
he did.
That's not reality, I'm afraid. That's
No.
not the played version.
I know, but in headcanon land.
Oh, Sam.
In Delusion Land,
In Illusion World.
Technically, though, I mean, if WandaVision, it could be true. Yeah, I mean, technically, like with the one that our current Legion, the world that they came from, where we just called like child support services and didn't have to deal with 10. That could be the universe where you did everything you were supposed to do, and you're now, running the place fine, and you're still alive. That could be where you live now.
Yes.
In your head.
I mean, either way, I guess the last thing that I'll ask you then is, if you two were to have any of the types of copying powers, what way would you want them to work?
In real life or in?
Let's say if you had either it in a game, or let's say if real life had superpowers and special abilities. Just either of those two. Like in the best scenario of powers exist, either in real life or in the game, how would you want them to be? I know that Sam's just disconnected there,
I know,
but,
just keep connected.
but
Yeah.
but what about you, Alex?
Oh, I honestly, I would definitely like ones where I don't have to touch people, especially ones where I don't have to touch them and then they almost die, like Rogue. I mean, screw that downside. Basically, I would definitely have to be the copying powers where you just see it and then you do it. And yeah, there would be like, it would be kind of a problem. Like if you don't see it, you don't do it. Like it would be kind of a stealth problem. So if you don't see it happening, then you wouldn't be able to. So people could take you by surprise. But still, it's much more workable for me, I think, because I find social interactions difficult anyway. So going up and like touching someone, you know, especially with the aim of getting their powers, like just getting it just right, it's just gonna be awkward and weird, and they're just gonna know that I'm doing it. It's just I'll have to like keep shaking their hand until I get the right,
So you prefer more like the, I guess to extra weeb cred, the powers from Naruto, the Sharingan, basically staring at them until you get the copied effect or ability, which, I mean, staring out of your bedroom window at someone until it works, definitely creepy, but nowhere near as creepy as holding someone's hand at the end of a handshake. Okay, you can let go now. Just another minute.
Just bringing them in for a full hug, and I've known them for like 2 minutes, and like
I like your power.
rubbing against them. It's like no, it's fine, just let it happen. Just let it happen.
Oh.
See, look, that's creepier than just like observing someone with binoculars out of my window.
So, Sam, if you were to have the ideal copying powers in either a game or real life, if real life had superpowers, how would you like it to work or function?
Well, considering Amalgam, it has a radius sphere around you of what powers you can take. Essentially, you kind of have spider sense then. If someone comes into your distance, you gain their powers, and you know what powers they have. You just go like, okay, someone's trying to attack me from behind with ice powers. Well, I'm going to take a stop to that.
I didn't actually think of that.
Neither did I until just now. The dumbest thing is, you weren't even there for the last session on the other Sunday, but that literally happened where a guy who was captured who had Amalgam said, "Huh, that's funny. What?" And he just goes, "Well, it seems to be quite a strange thing. I seem to have been able to make my cuffs intangible to myself," and then he just like jumps out and kills them all. And it was because that Kane's character has super dexterity and spatial, and he can make objects that are non-biological intangible. And he made his like rope that he was tied to a chair for intangible, slipped through them, and then just grabbed one of these like guys' guns and just started killing them all. And I completely forgot about that. So yeah, you'd know, thanks to Amalgam, you'd know when someone is within that, especially 30-meter radius is massive. That's a 60-meter diameter all around you. Just no one come near me.
Exactly, and just at that point, you just have their powers, and you know vaguely that they're closing in on you. If you keep the powers, or if the powers just disappear, you know, okay, well they've scarpered. It's okay.
Formulate a plan, basically, where it's like.
Whereas copying powers, I'm just imagining just having someone just wearing like full body, like except for their head, like have to leap out them, just like, come on, let me touch your head, damn it.
Yeah, at least with a radius field, it's like, yeah, you're standing within it. I've got them now.
Yeah,
but I didn't realize about the stealth thing. That's actually really good, because I mean, fair enough. If someone's stealthing around, you might notice that your powers have shifted, but like, considering that obviously you can't see all that way around you, unless if they're stealthing with you, like, it would be ironic if someone, say for instance, like Irving was trying to stealth up behind you. It's like, obviously Irving has hyper instinct, so their senses are super senses. So it's that moment of like, okay, I've got within a decent distance of this guy, and immediately your character just goes, I see you behind me from 20 meters away.
Yeah, it's just Irving trying to like do a drop attack from like like 50 feet high, just drop attack. The last 10 meters or so, just spider sense kicks in. Just you begin to see everything around me. Just
It's like
I
that-
just see a fly, just see a fly in the distance, just begin to flap its wings. I just in like the smallest reflection of a beer bottle, I just see Irving's
Scythe.
scythe just narrowing down, and then flip backwards.
Oh man. So yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah.
You have to think about like how could you cheat the system using these powers? No, like not cheat the system. How could you use your powers beyond what's written down?
Yeah, or at least
That is
read
another way to use your
between the
powers.
lines because of what's written down.
Exactly. Like they always show with people in comic books with powers. If you're slightly more I suppose intelligent or more creative, you can use your powers in rather funky ways.
Yeah.
Like, and just out of just, I'm being sure I mention this because it's another reference. Probably not.
No, go on, go on.
You've
Oh,
said it now,
okay.
so I have to continue.
Get the build up.
Well, it is a Spider Girl reference.
Oh, go for it, go for it.
Essentially, for reasons unknown to me, I think her father has as well. If she's touching a surface, she can make other people stick to the surface she's touching.
That's
So
weird.
she can, because of her spider powers, she can do that.
Okay.
And it's mostly because she is a creative person who uses her powers creatively. I don't know how her powers do that. Nonetheless, she can do that.
My favourite creative use of anyone's powers ever was when basically there's so I'm a bit of a fanboy of this, but there's a guy in Seven Deadly Sins who uses lightning powers, and then later on there's like, you need to be more creative, and he just creates an entire set of armor out of his lightning magic, and he just enhances a stick that he's using to cover it with lightning to make it a sword, and then coats his arm in like an entire shield made out of lightning. And it's like like heavy armor made out of electricity. It's like,
Is this enough?
it's
You're
like
not entertained.
it's like that kind of stuff is my jam. That kind of thing of, I have this power that's a fairly meldable element, and it doesn't, not that it has to make sense why it's okay for me to be covered in it, but I can do this, and I'm like, perfection. But I think we've now sort of running out of things to say about copying, but I think we've got fairly a decent amount of information. What's your favourite copying powers? Tell us in the comments below. Is it Monoma? Is it Parasite, Amazo, or is it somehow Kirby, which doesn't make the list? Rogue, yes. Is it Rogue? Or is it someone else that we haven't heard? Message us on Twitter at Animite Tales, or I go by Ongoer Joe on Animite Tales Twitter now. Or obviously hit us up on the Baytarians YouTube, or Joey the Mystic on Twitch, which is what we're currently streaming this on. This will then be eventually forwarded to YouTube, so check us out. And of course, thanks again, Alex and Sam, for joining me on this momentous occasion.
Indeed. Only I remember to mention the Absorbing Man. We could have talked about him, but alas,
that
it's
went
too
for
late now.
absorption, though. Great for the absorption,
That's
though.
absorption and assimilation, which we might get into in another. But as for next episode, I'm not sure, and I think I have an idea, but I'm not going to say it out loud. I'll probably tell it to you guys after this is over. So either way, thanks everyone for joining, and hopefully we'll get to hear from you again. In a couple of weeks' time, you might also be able to hear from us again with a few guest appearances as we go on into the episodes of Campfire Stories, where we'll actually be talking and telling stories from all of our different adventures in campaigns. We'll be getting other people in. We'll even be trying to get Coin and Coolboy Shane. We might be able to get another few people in. I've been sending some invites, and we've got at least like 4 or 5 maybes so far. So that'd be nice to hear from them again, and hear what weird things they're getting up to. But as again, thank you very much and take care. Ciao, ciao for now.